tirelessly to address the issues in Indian country that have long been underfunded or outright ignored. From infrastructure to education to the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, President Joe Biden has directed historic resources into the hands of tribal leaders who know best how to strengthen their communities. Across the Investing in America agenda, a historic $45 billion, more than 15 years worth of the Bureau of Indian Affairs annual budget has gone into Indian country through this administration. With that comes enduring and transformational change. It means electrifying homes on the Hopi Reservation in Arizona that have never had it, protecting cultural resources like salmon, which Pacific Northwest tribes have stewarded for thousands of years, building new transportation infrastructure for the Mescalero Apache Nation in New Mexico that will provide a safer travel route and boost the tribe's local economy, addressing toxic legacy pollution and abandoned oil and gas infrastructure that pollutes air and water for the Osage Nation in Oklahoma, and providing clean drinking water for Fort Peck in Montana. I could go on. This is a once-in-a-generation funding that is empowering tribes and making up for significant and systemic underfunding of tribal communities. Of course, we know that the need in our communities is still incredibly high. We know that many priorities still need adequate funding and resources. That's what decades of lack of investments look like. But what we have done will have lasting and enduring results for the generations that have counted on us to show up. It means that our kids and grandkids have a better shot at living lives where their needs are met, where their futures are bright, and where the pains and ills of the past no longer dictate who they can become. That progress is on us, and it's thanks to President Biden for making this administration and our cabinet firm and unwavering partners in Indian country. Now, like any good tribal council, our cabinet has not always been unified in every decision. We're passionate people, united in service to the American people, but also unique in our perspectives. But every single day, I have felt heard, I have felt respected, and I have felt secure that my advocacy on behalf of Indian country has been acknowledged and seen by the White House. 20 years ago, I would never have thought I'd be standing here. I would never have thought I'd be welcoming the President of the United States to come on stage and greet my relatives, friends, and colleagues from across the nation. Yet here we are. So please give a warm welcome to someone I am so honored to call our friend, President Joe Biden. Bear with us for a moment before the president gives his remarks. Assistant Secretary Newland and I wanted to acknowledge the wonderful leadership by President Biden. He has been a champion for Indian country over these past 4 years, and I felt the best way for us to acknowledge that was with a blanket. This is an 8th generation blanket from a tribally owned business, and I've had it embroidered. Secretary, Assistant Secretary. It says Joe Biden, champion for Indian country, 2021 to 2024. I think they want us to look over there where all the... Yes, but let's take this off. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
I could have used that blanket when I was lighting that Christmas tree. Both of us were freezing. Secretary. Thank you, Secretary Holland. This is Secretary Newland. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, it's the honor of my life to be a partner of the tribes throughout my presidency. I'm going to cherish this moment. You know, I was raised by a guy politically when I got here as a 29-year-old kid as a senator. I was raised by a guy named Danny Inouye. And I once used the phrase, tribe said, no, Joe, nations, nations. I want to thank Secretary Holland for the introduction and for your historic leadership of the Department of Interior. And this has been historic. It's been historic. I've worked with a lot of cabinet secretaries. I've appointed a bunch over my 59, 500-year career. But I tell you what, I've never met with a cabinet secretary more devoted to their obligation, the job she's taken on. I really mean it. And thanks to all the tribal leaders who traveled across the country representing your tribal nations. Folks, I came to office and I relaunched the White House Tribal Nations Summit to bring us all together again. Talk about the needs of your communities, to set goals, to listen, because I recognize that respect is the core of nation-to-nation relationships. We have a lot to be proud of, I think. We've gotten a lot done.
Va a ser tremendamente complicado, por lo que el panorama que se abre es de mucha inestabilidad.
Pues estaremos muy pendientes de ese panorama. Marta González Isidoro, periodista experta en Oriente Medio, un placer. Gracias por acompañarnos.
Muchísimas gracias.
Y vamos en directo a la señal que nos llega hablando del presidente saliente de Estados Unidos, Joe Biden, en la Tribal Nation Summit. Vamos a ver sus palabras.
Secretary Newland, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, it's the honor of my life to be a partner of the tribes throughout my presidency. I'm going to cherish this moment. You know, I was raised by a guy politically when I got here as a 29-year-old kid as a senator. I was raised by a guy named Danny Inouye. And I once used the phrase, tribe said, no, Joe, nations, nations. I want to thank Secretary Holland for the introduction and for your historic leadership of the Department of Interior. And this has been historic. It's been historic. I've worked with a lot of cabinet secretaries. I've appointed a bunch over my 59, 500-year career. But I tell you what, I've never met with a cabinet secretary more devoted to their obligation, the job she's taken on. I really mean it. And thanks to all the tribal leaders who traveled across the country representing your tribal nations. Folks, I came to office and I relaunched the White House Tribal Nations Summit to bring us all together again. Talk about the needs of your communities, to set goals, to listen, because I recognize that respect is the core of nation-to-nation relationships. We have a lot to be proud of, I think. We've gotten a lot done. From day one, my administration, we've worked to include indigenous voices in everything we do. Not only the first Native American cabinet secretary in history, more than 80 Native Americans now serve in senior roles across my administration. I mean this sincerely. With their help, we've shaped our approach to Indian country with respect and matched our words with action. I'm proud to have reestablished the White House Council on Native American Affairs and taken historic steps to improve tribal consultation. For example, you shared with me that too many federal programs treat tribes like they're subsidiaries of the government, like cities or counties, rather than tribal nations. Nations, not subsidiaries. That's who you are, you're nations. So At last year's summit, I signed a groundbreaking executive order to recognize that you should be treated as tribal nations with respect to your decision-making power. That executive order requires federal agencies to streamline grant applications, to co-manage federal programs, to eliminate heavy-handed reporting requirements. I'm trying to do that across the board, by the way. We're also investing in a historic $45 billion directly into Indian country. More is needed, but it's more than ever happened before. This includes helping tribal communities get through the pandemic with vaccines and arms and checks in pockets. We're helping tribes build new roads, bridges, deliver affordable, high-speed internet, and clean water across tribal communities. As a nation, we're making the biggest investment ever in fighting climate change, anywhere in the history of the world, which helps tribal communities to lead and transition to clean energy and ease the impact of droughts and wildfires and rising sea levels that threaten native lives and precious homelands. I secured the first ever advanced funding for the Indian Health Service. Where I come from, we call that a big deal. Indian Health Service, the tribal hospitals can plan ahead, order supplies, hire doctors, knowing the money will be there, not having to wonder. All told, in 4 years, we've created 200,000 jobs for Native Americans. A record low unemployment for Native communities. There's been an historic $8 billion increase in federal contracts awarded to Native businesses. And I'm proud, that's important, I think. I'm proud to have helped cut child poverty in tribal communities by more than 1/3 and more to do. The folks, at the same time, we're also doing what we should have done a long time ago, preserving ancestral tribal homelands. It really is important. It really is important. One example is restoring salmon fishing, which historically has been very important to Native communities. You know, I think it's very important that we memorialize Native culture and history by restoring and designating multiple national monuments that honor tribal nations and protect their homelands. From Bears Ears to Spirit Mountain, which comprise nearly 2 million acres combined, will be preserved in perpetuity forever, ever. I remember a young woman came up to me, a young girl comes to me and said, I bent down, she said, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Can you take care of Bear's Ears?" I said, "I beg your pardon? Can you take care of Bear's Ears?" I thought she wanted me to capture a bear, you know. And when we signed the bill, I gave her the pen. Look, it's sacred, it's magnificent. And this year, my administration designated the first Native Marine Sanctuary proposed by indigenous communities, which is off the coast of California, which occupies 4,500 square miles. That's off limits. You know, these efforts are totally consistent with my commitment when I came to office to preserve 30% of all America's lands and waters permanently by the year 2030. And we're well on our way because of the help you've given me. And we're doing all this with respect for the stewardship practices that tribes developed over the centuries, known as indigenous knowledge. I believe tribes should have a say in how these sacred lands are managed. To this day, they should have a say. And last year alone, we doubled the number of co-stewardship agreements, totaling 400 with tribal nations. All of this is a stark cry from the failed policies of the past. In October, I saw many of you in Arizona. It's a day I'll never forget. On behalf of the American people, I felt it was really important for a president of the United States to stand up and right a wrong that had been ignored for a long time and apologize for the We're not about erasing history, we're about recognizing history, the good, bad, and the ugly. I apologize for the federal Indian boarding school era, a dark chapter that spanned 150 years from the 1960, in which entire generations of Native children were literally stolen from their families and tribes and sent away to boarding school. The official policy in the federal government designed to sever ties between children and their tribal families, their language, and their culture. Today, we act to continue that healing process. I'm proud to announce we're establishing the historic Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania as a new national monument. So I want everyone to know. I don't want people forgetting 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, pretend it didn't happen. The Carlisle Indian School was the first off-reservation federal Indian boarding school for Native children that were taken to, the first one. About 7,800 children from more than 140 tribes were sent to Carlisle, stolen from their families, their tribes, and their homelands. It was wrong. In making the Carlisle Indian School a national monument, we make clear that what great nations do. We don't erase history, we acknowledge it, we learn from it, and we remember so we never repeat it again. We remember so we can heal. That's the purpose of memory. Now, part of the tragedy of Indian boarding schools is that they deliberately tried to erase the culture of tribes by ensuring that children lost their language and their traditions. That's why the next chapter of healing requires revitalizing native languages. My wife, Jill, to her, this is something our First Lady cares deeply about. She's an educator. In her first trip with Secretary Holland, she visited the language immersion program of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Jill saw Native children light up as they recited words their ancestors once spoke. Over 3/4 of the remaining Native languages are in danger of being lost forever. That's why today my administration is moving ahead on a 10-year plan to revive Native languages in a serious effort. It's a vision that works with tribes and support teachers, schools, communities, organizations in order to save Native language from disappearing. This matters. It's part of our heritage. It's part of who we are as a nation. It's how we got to be who we are. We also heard loud and clear that public safety is a top concern of Native communities. That's why when I was a vice president, when we reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, which is my daughter says I wrote with my own paw. I wrote it 30 years ago, one of the proudest things I ever did. We also reaffirmed tribal sovereignty and expanded tribal jurisdiction to cover cases where outside predators harm members of Indian nations in Indian country and decided there. I also signed an executive order to improve public safety and criminal justice to address the crisis of missing or murdered Indigenous people. These efforts, and all of our efforts, are a matter of restoring dignity that was taken away from tribal nations. Dignity. My dad used to say, Joey, and I mean sincerely, everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity. A word most often used in my family by my dad. Dignity. That's the foundation of our nation-to-nation partnership. Let me close with this. This is my final White House Tribal Nation Summit as your president. It's been an overwhelming honor, I mean sincerely, an honor of a lifetime to usher in a new era of tribal sovereignty and self-determination. A new era grounded in dignity and respect that I've seen and experienced in many ways. In October, I had the honor to bestow one of our nation's highest medals, the National Medal of Humanities on joy, Harjo, the first Native American to serve this nation as poet laureate. She once wrote, and I quote, "You are a story fed by generations. You carry songs of grief, triumph, and loss. Feel their power as they ascend with you, as you walk, run swiftly, even fly into infinite possibilities." End of quote. To all the tribal nations, I say thank you, and I mean it sincerely. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your trust in me. But most of all, thank you for your friendship and always believing, as I do, that the possibilities of our nation are limitless. I was once asked when I spent more time with Xi Jinping of China than any other world leader has, over 108 hours alone with him. I was on the Tibetan Plateau with him in China. And I looked at me and said, "Can you define America for me?" And this is on the record. I said, "Yes, one word." He looked at me through a translator. I said, "Possibilities." In America, we believe anything is possible if we do it together. And that's what we've done. Damn it, we're going to continue doing it. Thank you.
En directo, comparecencia, palabras pronunciadas, discurso del presidente de Estados Unidos, del presidente saliente de Joe Biden, hablando en la Tribal Nation Summit, hablando de esas comunidades indígenas norteamericanas, hablaba de los puestos de trabajo creados para estas comunidades, hablaba del respeto hacia sus lenguas, hacia sus costumbres y hablaba de que había hablado de este asunto con el presidente chino, con Xi Jinping, acerca de este tema. De esta forma es como despedimos esta edición del cierre de Wall Street. Voy a contarles cómo han despedido la sesión los índices norteamericanos, porque se ha producido ese cierre durante las palabras del presidente saliente Joe Biden. Cierre negativo para los índices norteamericanos, con un Dow Jones que ha despedido la sesión con caídas del 0,39% y que partirá mañana de los 44.466 puntos, caídas al cierre para el S&P 500 del 0,6%, 6.053 puntos. El índice tecnológico Nasdaq pierde al cierre cerca de un punto porcentual, 0,95% abajo y 21.416 puntos. Así es como despedimos esta edición del cierre de Wall Street cuando son las 10 y 12 minutos en directo a la Central Europea. Gracias por acompañarnos y hasta mañana.
Silver Gold Patrimonio nace en 2018 con el objetivo de innovar en el mercado de los metales preciosos de inversión, ofreciendo nuevas alternativas para que cualquier persona, familia o empresa pueda entrar en el fantástico mundo de los metales de inversión de forma sencilla y acompañada por consultores expertos en el sector. Silver Gold Patrimonio quiere avanzar contigo.
¿Qué cuento quieres hoy? ¿Te cuento uno de los míos? ¿El del farmacéutico? ¿O el de María, la abogada?
El de Ana, la arquitecta.
Vale. Eras una niña que soñaba con crear los edificios más impresionantes de la Tierra. Se pasaba el día dibujándolos. Sabía que algún día acabarían llegando a lo más alto de cada ciudad. Y que cualquier persona...
Cada profesional tiene detrás una historia increíble. Creer en ella es lo que de verdad cuenta. Banca, el banco de los profesionales.
¿Quieres conocer en profundidad los mercados financieros? El máster de trading de Active Trades te ayudará a profundizar en todo lo relacionado con el trading.
Gracias, energías fósiles. Pero es el momento de empezar a separarnos. CEPSA se transforma en Mueve para impulsar un futuro con más energías sostenibles. Este futuro tiene futuro.
Mueve.
¿Buscas la plataforma más confiable para tus criptomonedas? Binker es el exchange número 1 en copy trading a nivel mundial. Más de 45 millones de usuarios confían actualmente en nosotros. más de 800 criptomonedas y 190.000 traders élite, es decir, traders profesionales. Un fondo de protección de más de 400 millones de dólares. Un volumen diario de 10.000 millones de dólares. Un ratio de reserva de 1.5 para que tus activos estén totalmente protegidos. Genera más rendimiento con tus criptomonedas. Regístrate hoy. Tinted, seguridad, confianza y éxito.
¿Te preocupa que tu inquilino no pague el alquiler? Sabemos que esto puede ser un desafío. Aunque los gastos son fáciles de calcular, el verdadero reto es gestionar la falta de pago por parte del inquilino. SEAC te ofrece una garantía de renta asegurada hasta que recuperes tu vivienda, pase el tiempo que pase. Relájate. SEAC se encarga de todo. Alquila tranquilo. SEAC responde.
¿Qué cuento quieres hoy? ¿Te cuento uno de los míos? ¿El del farmacéutico? ¿O el de María, la abogada?
El de Ana, la arquitecta.
Vale. Eres una niña que soñaba con crear los edificios más impresionantes de la Tierra. Se pasaba el día dibujándolos. Sabía que algún día acabarían llegando a lo más alto de cada ciudad. Y que cualquier persona...
Cada profesional tiene detrás una historia increíble. Creer en ella es lo que de verdad cuenta. Avanza, el banco de los profesionales.
Pensamos que la economía mundial no se encamina hacia una recesión inminente y vemos señales de que nos encontramos más ante una rotación que ante un desplome. Bajo esta coyuntura, estos son los 3 factores a monitorizar en este cuarto trimestre del 2024.